What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to Mets Weekly. Now, before we get into today's video, I want to remind everyone to hit that like button, subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel, and turn on those post notifications to not miss the live recordings of the Mets Weekly podcast every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, all off season long. Make sure to follow us on TikTok and on X for content over there, and make sure to follow all three hosts individually. The links are in the description. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. And as we await the pursuit to retain our star closer, Edwin Diaz, the Mets still have an entire bullpen to fill this winter, with left-handers Brooks Raley and AJ Minter seen as the only real locks in that department to return for 2026. The Mets are expected to be aggressive on the reliever market. And after last year's disaster from many, it's likely that the Mets will look external to add to this bullpen, and that's exactly what we're going to do today, as we're going to deal out 5 free agent relievers that the Mets should target this offseason.
Preface with bullpen arms. We know they're always finicky and they have their ups and downs, and one year they can look amazing, one year they fall off the face of the earth. You know, David Stearns has hit on some and has missed on others. But when you look at the Mets bullpen, they need top-end relievers. As we obviously wait for Edwin Diaz, we could use a replacement. We're going under the assumption in this video that Diaz is still here, because we really only have one closer type in this video. So we're looking to build that new bridge that the trade deadline acquisitions did not, as well as going for some low-risk, high-reward bounce-back candidates that could, again, fill those middle innings who have that high-leverage experience.
And one thing that you are going to realize actually with this group is that they're all right-handed relievers, because the Mets, like we just said, Minter and Raley, both of them are left-handed relievers. Usually we are on the hunt for a second lefty or looking for, a guy who can be a little bit versatile from the left side, but the Mets currently are in a situation where they do not need to go crazy for left-handed relievers or overpay for left-handed relievers, since they do have Minter and Raley coming back for the 2026 season. So let's start this one off with the first reliever on the market, and that being Jason Foley. Now, Jason Foley is going into a 30-year-old season, 6'4", 250 pounds, a former undrafted signing by the Tigers back in 2016. Now, he was non-tendered by Detroit earlier this month after missing the entire 2025 season, recovering from right shoulder surgery, and in his last healthy season in 2024, Foley posted a 3.15 earned run average, a 3.82 fielding independent pitching, striking out 18.4% of batters across 60 innings pitched. He's predominantly a ground ball pitcher with a low 3/4 side swipe arm angle. He has a hard running sinker with up to 20 inches of run that sits at 97 and 98 and can top 100, a gyro cutting slider, an occasional running fastball that sits 97 and 98 with great rising shape, and a low 90s changeup with extra horizontal break to the glove side. Foley will be entering arbitration 1 in 2026, projected to make around $2 million this season as he looks to regain form after surgery.
Number one of our reclamation projects. So you get a guy who, before this injury, has thrown 60 innings or more in 3 straight seasons before this past season. And what we kind of want with these relievers are guys that you could start, let's say, in the middle innings, who have been better versions of guys like Ryan Stanek and Huascar Braziman, who at the beginning of the year can be put in that kind of mid to lower high leverage. But Jason Foley does have at least one full year as being the closer in Detroit. He got a few saves in 2023, but this is a guy who has pitched in the 9th inning, had a 28 save season the year before he got injured. So it gives you that versatility, which, again, we say it all the time, especially with Edwin Diaz. We've seen the Mets in the past do this with Edwin Diaz. If you're facing a high impact team, let's say it's the Los Angeles Dodgers, if in the 8th inning they got Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman due up, use the best relievers to face those guys and not be afraid because, you burned Edwin Diaz, who the hell's closing the 9th inning? I want Carlos Mendoza to have multiple guys who have had and that have closer experience. You can use Edwin, and you have a guy like Jason Foley, and maybe he comes in the middle of the pecking order, but again, we've seen he can work his way into that, high leverage role, and you shouldn't feel bad. And like you said, it's not going to cost a lot. He was, surprisingly DFA by the Tigers. The Tigers just kind of wanted to destroy their whole bullpen. Kyle Finnegan, as well as a free agent they acquired at the deadline. They DFA'd Foley. They DFA'd Alex Lang. They've kind of retooled their bullpen. But if you're telling me Jason Foley's coming in and as of right now is your seventh inning guy, your third best righty, I think that's a really good option. Again, in the middle to be higher than, let's say, Huascar Brasma, which we do expect to be back next year. He's above Huascar Brasma and potentially between with that high upside of, again, who he has been a very solid closer in the past. As arbitration, he was going to make about $2.5 million. Him hitting the free agent market, maybe he gets a little bit more, maybe a couple $1,000,000. You get his control rights, and you have a guy. Even if you were to lose Edwin Diaz, again, it's another option that can pitch the ninth inning. But again, in a perfect world, he's a really solid middle of the bridge to the closer.
Obviously, there isn't much risk involved. There's probably a little bit of concern, obviously, with the injury, because we know that shoulders can be a lot more trickier than elbows, because we have a little bit more of a conclusion with elbows as compared to shoulder injuries. So we'll see what the workload would look like. However, one thing that we do obviously look at for these contact managers is the vulnerability aspect of platoons. And when he started off his career, he definitely struggled against left-handed hitters a lot. And that was one thing that kind of breached his consistency a little bit as to why he was not able to maintain such a closer role for that long. However, his last healthy season was his best season of his career against left-handed hitter. They slashed 188, 300, 341 against him, which is career best in pretty much every single one of those categories. Not to mention his ability overall to limit the home run ball. And we all know that when contact managers are on the mound, we know that when you see a left-handed hitter, that is their most vulnerable part to be giving up the long ball, giving up hard contact. And with that extra secondary stuff that he does have, he could be effective. Who knows what his velocity is going to look like, again, coming off of shoulder surgery, but I would say it is definitely worth a flyer, especially if he is good for you. You got 2 more years of control afterwards for 2027 and 2028. So I think that would be a really good option. It is not the sexiest pick because of where he is at right now, but it would definitely be a good flyer to take as of right now. Now, speaking of flyers and buy low, this is another one that I feel like a lot of people know this name. However, it's been very, very spotty for him, and that being Michael Kopech. Now, Michael Kopech is now going into a 30-year-old season, 6'3", 220, a former first-round pick by Boston back in 2014. He was obviously in the infamous Chris Sale trade. Kopech has had an injury-plagued career since the very beginning, which took him out of consideration to be a starting pitcher going into 2024, and eventually getting him traded to the Dodgers from the White Sox later on that year. Fast forward to 2025, Kopech would struggle to stay healthy once again, only pitching 11 innings due to a nagging shoulder injury and a torn meniscus in his right knee that required surgery. But when he is on the mound, he's an explosive right-hander with a high 46-degree arm angle and big extension. He has a fastball that sits at 97 to 98, can top 100 to 101, with over 18 inches of induced vertical break and a fantastic vertical approach angle, a low 90s cutter with RPMs that reach 2600s, a late dropping slider that he rarely throws. He's mainly a 2-pitch guy, but with some of the most explosive stuff from any right-hander. Kopech does come with some warts. He can be very wild, he can run up a lot of full counts, and he does not hold runners well. However, the stuff can play if he can apply it and stay on the field. As a high-risk, high-reward free agent, Kopech will have a very tenacious market this winter, looking to harvest his once first-round pedigree as a full-time reliever.
I think we've talked about him in the past. The stuff is elite. And again, you think about what he was. He was the number 1 prospect for the Red Sox, gets traded for Chris Sale, and he goes to the Dodgers. The Dodgers tweak a little bit, and I do always like taking some pitchers that have pitched in those big, pitching labs, we say, Tampa Bays, the Milwaukees, the Dodgers, where they can just fine-tune things and you get their best success. And if, again, like you see, the 2-pitch guy, he throws a change of 1% of the time. In his 10 innings, he's a fastball cutter guy. And like I said, the only problem is, and we've seen these with Mets relievers, and it happens a lot with the Pash regime of this guy walks a lot of guys. And with Justin Willard coming in, he went on that podcast saying he wants guys to throw strikes in the zone. I think if he got his hands on him, maybe you can get a little bit. But again, he's been so wild throughout his whole major league career, especially now at age 30. It's very hard to expect, oh yeah, Michael Kopech's gonna, walk less than 15, 20% of his batters. Like, there's a risk. It's just what he is. He's gonna throw that nasty cutter and fastball. So I don't like 2-pitch relievers. I get this bullpen. It's what they are. I like my relievers to have a little bit more diversity in their repertoire. He's seen success in the big leagues ever since becoming a reliever, stopped being a starter. Again, it's a buy low, and we've seen with Stearns in the past where he likes these crafty, great stuff relievers that, like, would any of us be surprised in mid-December or early January, a 1-year, $6 million, prove it deal for Kopech to the Mets? I mean, it just this kind of is the definition of what Stearns likes in pitchers, and you get him in the slab, we'll see what happens. And again, could this be a creative new closer? Like, there, especially with how chaos pitching that Stearns has had in the past, he has the stuff for it. It's just, can he harness it enough to be consistent, reliable, and healthy? Because obviously he's dealt with a ton of injuries throughout his career. So again, it's a buy low with the upside of, holy hell, this could be one of the best relievers in the game with just his pure stuff. It's just, one, the availability, and can he throw it in his zone and get, swings and misses outside of the zone?
There's definitely some hit or miss here with Michael Kopech. There always has been ever since he came into the league. He obviously came in as a first-round talent, as we all know. I think the one thing that is a little bit concerning to me with him is, obviously, we do see a huge usage of velocity from him. And I'm really hoping that if the Mets were to bring somebody like him in, maybe we change the sequence a little bit, not to mention, not just because of predictability or lack of chases, lacks of swings and misses, the fact that I want to see this guy actually stay healthy and stay on the field. And maybe dialing back from 83% fastball might help him from doing so. His command actually does grade out fairly well. He's able to locate the proper pitches that are competitive. The only problem is there is a conglomerate of pitches that are uncompetitive from him that don't even stem into a player's command. Control and command can obviously be interpreted in different ways. I kind of see it as two sides of the same coin. With him, it's really just all about harvesting that command that he has and creating better pitchability. Maybe that is what we get from a guy like Justin Willard at the helm. We don't know what this hire will do for them as the new pitching coach. However, Michael Kopech would be one of those projects that you would possibly try and harvest the best of his stuff and try to put out a quality reliever that we know has the ceiling and that is capable of doing so. However, there's also a chance that maybe you give this guy a 1-year deal and he is just not able to harvest it, and it ends up exactly like how Shintaro Fujinami ended up when he signed a 1-year deal with the Mets. I mean, there's plenty of cases of empty velocity, lack of chases, lack of pitchability. However, if it is a 1-year deal, it's definitely somebody that I would pursue because this is high leverage stuff that we are talking about, and there's a lot of good underlying stuff, especially with how his stuff grades out. I think that this would be a really, really good addition to the bullpen that maybe could create a little bit more depth, especially with how balanced he is as well against left-handed hitters and right-handed hitters. That moves us to the third reliever on this list, and that being Hunter Harvey. Now, Harvey is going into a 31-year-old season, 6'3", 233 pounds, former first-round pick by Baltimore back in 2013. Like Foley and Kopech, Harvey also missed a majority of 2025 due to upper body injuries, pitching just 10 2/3 innings this season. But when healthy, Harvey is a strikeout right-hander with a high 50-degree arm angle, but unusually has phenomenal control of the strike zone despite a non-repeatable motion. His fastball sits at 96 to 97 and touches 100 with over 17 inches of induced vertical break, a late fading splitter with low spin. He has a backdoor swiping slider and a downward tilting curveball in the low 80s. With his velocity coming down a tick in 2025, there still is hope that Harvey's near elite graded secondary stuff can continue to help him to put away batters with different sequencing. Harvey will be entering free agency for the first time this winter, hoping to recoup his market that he lost in his contract year due to injury.
This is a guy that David Stearns has already shown interest in. Last year, we saw the reports that, the Royals and the Mets were talking about a potential Hunter Harvey for Starling Marte trade. This is the definition of a kind of Ryan Stanek replacement. They are kind of a very similar type pitcher, and you get him a little younger. Guy's still throwing 96, 4-pitch mix, but like I said, I like some more diversity in the pitch mix. And he's not one of these he has 4 pitches, but it's really 2.5. No, this is like, obviously it's 4 streamers at the time, but it's 10, 20, the 20, 20, 10 for the split slider and the curve. So again, there's a balanced repertoire. He's a strikeout guy, which again, this is what you need. And as much as David Stearns wants to improve the run prevention, you know what the best run prevention is? Striking dudes out. That's the best case, and especially for relievers. And we saw with Tyler Rogers this past year of trying to get contact managed. Especially, we'll see what the rest of the infield defense is. But the best run prevention is just getting guys that you can put in the back end of the bullpen who strike guys out. No contact managers you don't need. Just get guys who can strike dudes out and avoid your defense potentially screwing up. Obviously, 2024, you saw a little bit of regression, but then you look at his 2023, you saw maybe one of the more underrated relievers in the game. I would expect of this list, this is of the 5 guys we're going to talk about, this probably is the most likely to end up being realistically on the Mets because, again, we've seen the past interest from David Stearns in the past. More variety in the pitch mix, more strikes compared to a guy like Kopech. The guy doesn't walk anybody, which, again, obviously he only had 10 1/3 innings pitched. He probably would have been the 99th percentile walker. Again, I get it's only 10 1/3 sample. Yeah. But again, guys who don't walk people. And he's been like that. He's been like that. So he throws strikes. He strikes people out. This is the definition of what you kind of want in today's bullpen.
And this is another guy that when you're talking about from platoons, obviously a lot of more of just a swing and miss pitcher as compared to somebody like Jason Foley. But this is also another platoon where he is able to utilize all of his weapons against lefties and righties. He's able to have a little bit more of sequencing, and like we said, throws so many strikes. He fills the strike zone, and maybe it might lead to a few homers here and then. If you are throwing strikes, attacking hitters with plus stuff, most of the time you are going to succeed. I think that if Hunter Harvey, considering the experience he does have, regaining form from his injury that he had this season, I think that if you were to sign him, he is the most likely out of these 3 that we've already mentioned that would be able to turn right into one of those high leverage 7th inning, 8th inning, 9th inning type of guys, because he does have the experience, he does have the arm, he has the pitch ability to do so, and he has fantastic command as to where he could strike guys out at will. The last time he pitched was at the beginning of August. You'd have to see if he's healthier come spring training. However, in all of those outings that he had, he was pretty spotless. He was pretty good. And not to mention, he still got a decent amount of swings and misses. Even though that's a very small sample, it still is encouraging for a guy when you see him being out that long with a shoulder injury, like we said, can be very tricky. And that brings us to the 4th reliever on this list, which is definitely my number 1 target behind Edwin Diaz in free agency, and that being Brad Keller. Now, Brad Keller is going into a 30-year-old season, 6'5", 255, former 8th round pick by Arizona back in 2013. Keller is coming off his first season as a full-time reliever to where he had a career year with the Cubs, posting a 2.07 earned run average, a 2.93 fielding independent pitching, striking out 27.2% of batters across 69.2 innings pitched. He's a leverage carry-on right-hander with limited extension from a high 50-degree arm angle and a 5-pitch mix. His fastball sits at 97 to 98 and can top 101 with over 15 inches of induced vertical break, a high spin slider with RPMs in the 2600s, a 2-seam style sinker that sits 96 to 97, a devastating arm side sweeper that tortures right-handed hitters, and a low 90s screwball style changeup. He has great control of the strike zone, solid command, limits a lot of hard contact, and expands the zone extremely well. As a starting pitcher, Keller was always scouted as a jack of all trades but master at none while struggling to find consistency. As a full-time reliever, Keller has proved himself as a Swiss Army knife in the Cubs bullpen, pitching and thriving in all levels of leverage, and even as an occasional opener as a former starter. Plenty of high-profile arms on the free agent market this winter. Keller is still in line to get paid as one of the best back-ended relievers available.
Of the 5 guys, this is the most boom or bust pick on this list because we've seen this is the first year of a breakout. This is the first time we've seen him in the big leagues have success. Obviously, you said he came up as a Royals starter, wasn't any good. Then he moves around. Now the Cubs gets into the Cub bullpen, has a really good year, and all the under the hood data that you would love to see as a reliever. With bullpen arms, we say it all the time. They're really the opposite of relievers is anything is sustainability. They're the most fickle. Great one year, suck next year, average, below average, like it doesn't matter. So, yes, I think Keller is coming off a tremendous year. Everything looks great. The velo shot up to like 97. Also, you have to take into account he's coming off and he wants to probably get paid. Again, I think of the big relievers out there, I wouldn't be shocked if aspects coming up the past year. We've seen guys like Robert Stevenson in the past, just to name a couple guys that have come in the free agency with a big walk year, get 3 years at close to 15 to 14 million. So there's a world where he potentially, after Diaz, Suarez, Devin Williams, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the 4th biggest reliever contract given. So there's a lot of things I like, but my only problem and only fear of a guy, Kopech's case, we've seen a couple years. Hunter Harvey, we've seen a couple years. Jason Foley, we've seen a couple years. This is the only guy on this list where maybe you can say Brad Keller's been the best of all the guys we've talked about so far, meaning season-wise, I'd be very open to signing
that type of Swiss Army knife type of thing. We don't see that a lot with Mets relievers. We always see them needing to be in these certain situations, aside from somebody like Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz is not guaranteed to come back as of right now. There's obviously some concern with the consistency that actually deserves, a Robert Stevenson type deal before he obviously got injured. Would obviously have a little bit more confidence in this one. The main reason as to why is this was his first year as a full-time reliever. When you're talking about the inconsistencies in the past, that is the starter version of him. And when you see how his velocity went up a monster level from him obviously going back into the bullpen, I feel like you do have a different version of him that was able to sustain to where he was going past that 60-inning threshold that we normally see those relievers go into. He also was really good in the postseason for the Cubs as well. He had, 5 appearances, gave up like 1 run. Like that was it, and I think he closed out a few. That was his first piece of postseason experience as well, and he passed it with flying colors.
Again, when we talk about relievers, it's just, and especially we have another guy left where he's been consistent. That's kind of where I want to be. I'd rather maybe take the stuff downgrade and just for the more reliable source. But again, you're trying to swing big for bullpen arms, and if the stuff plays, that's kind of what you're getting. The main criteria that everyone should look for is just pure stuff. And hopefully you have a great, pitching environment and pitching index in your front office and in your team to harness that great stuff to make these guys. So, the tools are there and the stuff is there. And if you think maybe Justin Willard and this pitching lab can get their hands on it and not make this an aberration and make this consistently what Brad Keller is, are you willing to take that risk on a multi-year deal? That's the only problem that you could potentially see this, where everyone else seems to be in a 1 year, at most, maybe a 1+ deal. I think, Brad Keller being a little younger, being 30 and coming off that great year, especially with the reliever market is, and Phil Maton. Like I say that, and Phil Maton opened the reliever market getting 2 years guaranteed with a 3rd-year option, especially coming off that good year. Is it just the price risk worth potential the reward for a guy like Keller?
I mean, we're also getting reports about Keller drawing interest as a starter and reliever. We saw a report about that. I believe it was Joel Sherman of the New York Post who put that out. I don't think I would be comfortable with that, but if I did have to overpay to a certain extent to make him a reliever, I probably would go in that type of direction. Again, when I'm looking at this guy's profile, I'm seeing, like I said, a jack of all trades where I feel like he's finally found that home in the bullpen. And yes, I understand that it is 1 year that he had. However, I think that it was fully stretched out to his experience and the best that he can obviously offer going into his 30s now, where, again, a reliever prime can be extended into the typical 30s of a veteran pitcher. And finally on this list, we have the best reliever out of all 5 of these guys. And he's going to be one of the highest touted relievers out there on the free agent market, and that being Pete Fairbanks. Going into a 32-year-old season, 6'6", 235, a former 9th-round pick by Texas back in 2015. Fairbanks will hit the open market for the first time this winter after the Rays declined his $11 million club option earlier this month, and to no fault of his own, as he's coming off of another phenomenal season, posting a 2.83 earned run average, a 3.63 fielding independent pitching, striking out 24.2% of batters across 60 and a third innings pitched. As one of the best relievers in baseball over the past 5 seasons, Fairbanks is a hard-throwing right-hander with a high slot drop and drive delivery that creates some of the best deception in the game from a right-handed pitcher. His fastball sits at 97 to 98 and tops 100 with over 18 inches of induced vertical break. He has a glove side breaking slider with RPMs in the 2500s, a mid-90s changeup with hardtail fade, and an occasional low 90s gliding cutter. Plenty of postseason experience and plenty more left in the tank. Fairbanks is expected to get a huge payday on the open market, as the Rays' notorious penny pinching for nothing but loss could once again be an aspiring contender's gain.
Probably the most consistent reliever on this list. I mean, this is a guy who pitched in the 9th inning and had success. He's pitched in the 8th inning and had success. So he gives you that versatility of, again, if Diaz is here, that gives you a guy, unlike the past years where the Mets obviously brought in a closer to be the setup man. Yes, Pete Fairbanks has closed games, but throughout his career with the Rays, he's also been a great setup man who also has, and the Rays, we know, they are pitching, chaos, kind of like what the Detroit Tigers are. They pitch everybody. It seems like they develop 7 relievers, and they just use everybody in different spots. We also saw this year, like you said, he's added a cutter, which he's notoriously been a 2-pitch guy, fastball slider. He's slightly incorporated a little bit of the changeup. But this year, he do it only 4% of the time, but finally maybe starting to open up the repertoire, which again, like I said, I prefer a little bit more multifaceted assets. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets 2, maybe 3 guaranteed years with the AAV pushing 15, maybe $16 million a season. That's how good of a reliever he's been in the past. And that's why I love the idea of how he approached the trade deadline to trying to build the super bullpen. It didn't work, but I hope he doesn't be scared off of, okay, I tried to go big, it didn't work, and try to begin. That was the first time where it's okay. That was a big. Again, we make the joke, but that's a big market attempt. He went out and tried to get big names, and it just didn't work. If you put Fairbanks in that 8th inning, you bring back Edwin Diaz. One, that brings everybody else down in the pecking order. Your Minters and Brooks Raley, who's your lefties. Let's say you bring another one of these guys and kind of lower leverage, takes a lot of pressure off everyone else in the bullpen, and he also gives David Stearns that ability to say, hey, I've got a setup man who is an elite setup man, not a closer that's never pitched in the 8th inning. I think Fairbanks is the best option to be that bridge to Diaz in the 8th inning to the 9th. And, it's just being able to give Mendoza a little more comfortability of bringing in guys who have done that role successfully instead of going with let's just get multiple closers and seeing if that works.
So we're obviously doing this video with Edwin Diaz in mind because he is still available and the Mets are still pursuing him. But however, maybe there might be a part 2 to this video if Edwin Diaz does not end up coming back, because obviously we are talking about right-handed relievers here that could possibly set up Edwin Diaz at their best. Maybe there is a different conversation if Edwin Diaz ends up going elsewhere. However, the Mets still have a big bullpen to fill. Obviously, they have plenty of spots that are open. Obviously, we've seen a lot of turnover in the Mets bullpen over these last few years. We've seen turnover in the middle of the season. So we will see how they make these certain changes, but we do know that the Mets do need to do a better job, and hopefully it goes better than it did at the deadline. And hopefully there's the same amount of aggressiveness, despite of how bad it went, for them to strengthen the bullpen for 2026. So we're going to end it off here, guys. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel, turn on those post notifications to not miss live recordings of the Mets Weekly podcast every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, all off season long. Make sure to follow us on TikTok and on X for more content over there. Follow all 3 hosts individually. The links are in the description. Let's go, Mets, and we will see you guys next time.